Welcome to episode 278 of Sports Geek. In this week, I chat all things sponsorship with Kim Skildum-Reid.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who has been watching old YouTube clips of himself far too regularly, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and you are listening to Sports Geek. You can find me at the Sports Geek website, sportsgeekhq.com. You can find the podcast on all good podcasting platforms, and you can subscribe to Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/SGN. Or you can even tune in and join in with our Sports Biz Zoom calls. I'm really enjoying those at the minute. And yes, I am the host of this podcast. If you are listening for the very first time, then you will find me watching old YouTube clips of myself, especially when I get them sent to me by one of Australia's greatest basketballers. Andrew Gay sent me a clip of me back in my day of the Tigers Hoodlums. If you'd listened to episode 275 with Chris Anstey, where we look back at the early days of the heyday of the NBL, as some might say, in the early 90s, when I was such a young fella and doing fan engagement before it was a thing. If you want to see an embarrassing photo of me from 20-odd plus years ago, I will put a link to that video in the show notes. It was our interview with Mark Bruder that went on primetime TV on Channel 10. But before I jump into this week's episode, talking sponsorship with Kim Skildum-Reid from Power Sponsorship, I just want a quick shout out to all the people who have been turning up to the Sports Biz Zoom calls. I really have been enjoying them. They're happening twice a week, Tuesdays 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which coincides with around midday lunchtime for people in Europe and South Africa. And then also 10 a.m. Wednesdays, which fits for the West Coast, around 5 p.m. West Coast time in the US and North America. So, and thank you for the people who tune in from the East Coast, and it might be a little bit later, but really enjoying the conversations. It's not a webinar. It's not me presenting. It really is a conversation. It's like those networking conversations you have at conferences, those things we're not allowed to go to at the moment. Yeah, that's what the Zoom calls are. I try my best to facilitate a discussion, get some good people in those calls. Last week it was all about stadiums and venues, I should say. This week's all about mobile. So there's a bit of crossover because we did talk about how the apps might help us in the stadium space, and some really good discussion. Thanks to former guests like Greg Slay from Optus Stadium jumping on the Zoom call last week. So yes, this week, mobile. If you listen to this straight away, you can tune into the Tuesday one, or you can tune into the Wednesday one. And then next week, May 26, 27, we're going to talk about grassroots sports and participation and how they get back. What does return to play look like? Getting people out there on the soccer fields, basketball courts, and the like. And please check out a social enterprise project that we kicked off. It sort of came out of the Sports Biz Zoom calls, called Grassroots Pledge. grassrootspledge.com.au, teamed up with the guys in Tix and Alex Grant, to give the local sports clubs a platform to allow supporters to say that they'll be back and support their clubs. I'm really interested to see how it can adapt, and effectively it allows a regular supporter to effectively make a pledge, whether it's a $10, $25 pledge, whatever they want to do, to say, yes, I'll be back and I will spend this money with your club. Just to give some the clubs that will be struggling without fans at their games. So check it out, grassrootspledge.com.au. Also coming up in the Zoom calls, June 2, 3. I'm going to run around in digital again. I'll get some good digital folk on that call. And then June 9, 10, we're going to talk about CRM and data, depending on which part of the world you're from. So if you are interested in those topics, please join in. But what I am enjoying is the wide array of people who are turning up and the different opinions, both from geography and sports and positions and roles, that's really making for an interesting discussion. So as much as it's going to be great to get mobile vendors and app developers and people who are developing apps and people who want apps for their stadium or their club in the mobile discussion, or lots of digital folk in the digital discussion, and obviously people running grassroots programs next week. I also want the opinions from everyone, and learn. It's a really good opportunity to learn about different parts of your organisation, different parts of the sports industry, how we're all affected by, COVID. What's it going to look like DC during COVID, and what's it going to look like post COVID. So, for those of you who have turned up, terrific. Thank you very much. For those of you who have joined in with conversation and recommended books during the calls, it's definitely widened my search of things I'm going to read, and I'm getting a lot of value. That's why I'm going to continue doing it. And the fact that I'm getting really good feedback from the people on the calls as well. Like I said, it's not a webinar, so don't come there to sit back and be spoken to. Like it's a real good opportunity to network and connect with different people in the industry. Before I get into my chat with Kim, I just want to do a quick plug for the Sports Geek Patreon campaign that helps support all of this content. If you like the podcast, you can support the podcast for as little as $4 a month or more if you wish. Or if you're a sports business that wants to connect with my audience, you can be a supporter at a silver or gold level. Please check it out. If you've got any questions, please send me an email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. But now I want to talk a little bit of sponsorship with Kim Skildum-Reid. My apologies, Skildum-Reid from Power Sponsorship. You can read her blogs on sponsorship at powersponsorship.com, and she also talks about her webinars, which she is doing, teaching people about sponsorship and helping people with sponsorship. And she's written a couple of real powerful blogs that she wrote before the pandemic. So I jumped on a Zoom call, because that's all we do these days, to chat with Kim Skildum-Reid from Power Sponsorship. Very happy to welcome to the podcast Kim Skildum-Reid, the founder of Power Sponsorship and author of many sponsorship books. Welcome to the podcast, Kim.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Well, normally I ask people how they got their start. Power Sponsorship, I was checking on LinkedIn, 26 years. You passed 25 years last year. Congratulations. How did you get your start in the world of sponsorship?
Oh, well, that's just Power Sponsorship. I mean, I was in the industry for 9 years before that, 8 years before that, because I started in America.
Yep.
So, and basically I had studied particle physics and applied maths at uni, and which has come in real handy.
Yeah.
And a couple of quarters short of graduating, I'd basically run out of money and simultaneously kind of run out of money. I was literally selling my plasma in order to buy groceries. And I also realized that I just didn't like university enough to spend my entire life doing graduate degrees and then working for a university, which is where my trajectory was going to go.
Yep.
So I had this kind of come to Jesus talk to myself and said, like, what do you really love? And I really, really love sports. And I played a lot of sports, and I went to a lot of sports. And then I thought, okay, what am I good at? And our family business was this sort of a trading post style newspaper for horse people.
Okay.
And we had grown it from 8 pages and, maybe 5,000 circulation to 2 different editions, over 156 pages each every month in 2 different markets. So
effectively
and
building
I was
out
a part of the marketing
company.
of that.
Yep.
I was going to trade shows and all this, and driving around with my sister when I was 16 and she was 14, all over, many states around where we lived. And so I thought, okay, I love sports, and I'm, seem to have a knack for marketing. I mean, I did okay. And so I wonder if there are jobs in sports marketing. I wonder. I had no clue. And I got my first job. I applied for tons of jobs, and I got my first job for a startup with 3 partners. And when I turned up for the interview at like 4:00 in the afternoon, they were all sitting around on the floor of their half-furnished office getting a giant FedEx batch ready to go to launch themselves to all these companies. And so I did my interview helping them, and I beat 400 other people out for the job. And that's where I started.
Okay. And so you sort of started in this space, and then how did you end up in the sponsorship space, and how did you come about to start Power Sponsorship?
Well, the agency that I worked for was actually like a sponsorship leverage agency. They worked for corporations,
Yep.
and so I spent my entire life on planes going to one football stadium or hockey or basketball or whatever, baseball, every single weekend of my life, making the hospitality stuff and the in-person kind of activations happen. Power Sponsorship came about when after I sort of used my CV to get to Australia, and
Yep.
I just didn't want to live in America anymore, and strung together a bunch of consulting gigs all around the world, and one of my stops was Australia. I fell in love with it. I got a job here, a proper job here, and basically that company kind of tanked after about a year or so of working for them. And so it was like, I ended up not wanting to leave and having to figure out a way to stay.
Yeah.
So I started my own business, and I got which was Power Sponsorship. It started out as Skildum-Reid Consulting, and it kind of accidentally turned into a Power Sponsorship.
Yep.
That wasn't really my idea at all. But started that, and got permanent residency, and the rest is history.
So, like, we're looking at how sponsorship has changed and evolved. So, like, from that time of the 90s and through the 90s and early 2000s, what did the sponsorship picture look like back then? What was it, either from the rights holder side or the sponsorship seeker side? What was the relationship like then, and how has it evolved over the past 20 years or so?
Right. So when I first got into this industry, it was really just at the point where most sponsors had gotten over that whole, ridiculous preoccupation with awareness and exposure. Yep. And they'd gotten into second generation, which, at least was productive. It was sort of when the 1-to-1 rule came out, where, $1 should be spent for every on leverage for every $1 spent on a rights holder fee. Yeah. And that was really useful because nothing was leveraged prior to that. It was just about how many times your logo on television or in the newspaper or what have you. And so what I tended to work on was sales promotions, because it's like, okay, what are we going to spend this $1 on? Yep. And it was either publicity stunts or short-term sales promotions. And then if the amount of profit on the incremental sales on the sales promotion, was more than the sponsorship cost, then yay, it was a big win. And, that's fair enough. That's second generation. We're at fourth generation now. And so, so it was sort of fun to do all of these things, but it always seemed a bit short-sighted when you were dealing with all these fans that were just so passionate and incredibly engaged. And it's like, that's all you're going to do is try to sell them some more frozen pizzas. That's it. Sell them frozen pizzas this week. That's all. Yeah. And there's got to be more to this than that. And of course there is so much more to this. And so, about the time I got to Australia in 92 was when there was an explosion of sort of brand-driven sponsorship, where brands were saying, okay, we can accomplish lots of objectives and we can do it over a bunch of time. Yeah. And so they became really multifaceted. And certainly that was in its nascent stages in the early 90s. And there was certainly then and still now the short-term thinking and the sort of, awareness-oriented sponsors. But that was sort of where that really started getting traction. And that was all well and good, but it was sort of, at its core, it was really selfish. Yeah. Because these sponsors were going, okay, it's getting really cluttered out there, so we have to be louder and more obnoxious at this sporting event or that festival or whatever than all the other sponsors to get everybody's attention. So they were so sort of blindly following their brand goals that they were really disrupting in a bad way the fan experience. And so now we're finally in a point where sponsors get it. Most sponsors get it.
Yep.
Where they're like, okay, well, the fans are paramount. So what we need to do is at the very least understand and respect their fan experience, and bonus points where we get our big traction is adding value to that and genuinely, authentically aligning with them. So that's so I've been through the whole trajectory at this point.
Because it was very much that case of either, there would be sponsors ambushing events, and then the sponsors that were the sponsors of events would try to ambush the ambushers, and you were getting that. Yeah,
it just became a my dick is bigger than your dick contest between all those sponsors, really. Sorry, apologies.
That's all right. I think everyone understands it.
Was just ridiculous. It was like you just wanted to smack them all, really.
And so how do you think, I guess, the piece that, in the last 10 years, we've seen the rise of digital and seen that played out in that space as well. How has that disrupted the sponsorship piece of the puzzle as the teams and rights holders have got more assets now and there's probably more opportunities to reach fans outside the stadium?
Well, the whole digital space, the whole, social space, all of that, apps, everything, I guess, digital, that has created a lot more opportunities. But what you've actually seen, an issue with that is that teams and sports have become really, really good at using this digital space to nurture their relationships with fans. What they're really, really bad at is actually sharing those ideas with sponsors.
Yeah.
They're like, and sponsors, like, these rights holders, they understand the fans and the fan experiences. So they actually need to get that kind of intelligence and those ideas fed through to them as to what's going to hit the mark. And so it's ridiculous how closely held some of those ideas tend to be. But what I'm finding, and sort of a lot of my recent writing has been harping on about this even more, is that prior to a pandemic taking hold, both rights holders and sponsors have focused too much on the in-person experience and the digital around that. I mean, the digital, even their digital has been focused on the game or the event or whatever. Yeah. And so it's been too hyper focused on that, and they really haven't paid much attention at all to the remote fans. Yep. So all those fans that, for whatever reason, they're not going to rock up at the event. They're not going to, I often talk about Manchester United, who apparently have 1.1 billion fans around the world. Like, how many of them are ever going to get their ass in a seat in Manchester? It's just a piddling amount. So, and everybody has those remote fans. And even if they're not genuine, target markets for a team, for instance, like if a team wants to sell merchandise and sell tickets and sell season tickets and all that that's what they want to do. So if somebody's not in that catchment to potentially part with some cash for them, they don't tend to nurture those people. The thing is, all those remote fans are enormously leverageable for sponsors. So the rights holders are being counterproductive in terms of, they're not actually selling the sponsors this hugely valuable, leverageable thing, where that's where digital just comes into its own, is with all these remote fans. So they're not selling that to them. Now we've got a pandemic. Everybody's a freaking remote fan. Like, everybody is. Yeah. So not only do the teams and the sports and all that kind of stuff need to learn to nurture those fans, but that's all they've got now for the sponsors. So I think, like, the silver lining to this, from one of the big silver linings that's going to come out after, a fair amount of pain, is that both rights holders and sponsors are going to respect and know how to really engage with remote fans, where it has been way backburnered for too long.
Yeah, I mean, it is a constant discussion. I joke that I'm a digital divorce counselor, like working between the digital teams and the commercial teams to break that piece.
Yep.
And partly it is a bit like, as you were saying before, the sponsorship of the commercial people, especially on the rights holder side, are selling the stuff that they know and that they know that works and they know they can see, because you can see the in-stadium activation and it's easier to quantify. And so I think they've been holding on to, I know how to sell that. And the digital is a little bit unknown. But you're right, 99% of fans aren't going to the game.
Right.
And so
and even if they do go to the game, they don't stop being fans when the game ends, and they don't stop being fans when the season ends. And so, like, even people are bums on seats are still remote fans a lot of the year.
So you talk a lot about activation and leverage and the differences and your definitions of them. Do you think, and one of the things, I'd love your opinion on, do you think that teams and the rights holders should be offering up more of those opportunities to sponsors to say, we know this about our fans, these are the opportunities that we can do? That's what they would like, rather than having the sponsor saying, here's a campaign that we think works for your fans, and if you're not going to give us anything, that's what we're going to run. Do you think that's where the collaboration needs to happen? Okay, first off, yes. I mean, there's a lot of competition for the dollars. There's going to be more competition going forward. And sponsors are going to be really, really picky about who's the most sophisticated, and the most sophisticated ones are going to be the ones that they're going to renew, or the ones that are going to sponsor anew are going to be the ones that are actually giving them that kind of intelligence and thinking that broadly about the ideas and sort of feeding them with those ideas. Yep. So yeah, basically I kind of got a bit lost there in that. That's all right. That's keep going. I know where you're headed, so keep going.
Sorry?
I know where you're headed, or like where you're. Keep going on that point.
Okay, so I think that, but I forgot your original question. That was the problem.
So it's more about activation and leverage. I guess moving away, and is there a way to better collaborate? Like when I talk to the sponsors and they give the traditional stuff, signage at the stadium or signage on a jersey, those kind of things, and then they say, but of course you can activate, and whether that's included in their proposal to say we could do these cool digital campaigns and in-stadium pieces.
I'm not really a huge fan of turnkey sponsorships. Yep. I'm not. I think that the sponsor, if they're going to do this, they should just commit, because integrating it across everything that they do is really where they're going to get the most value. Yep. So going, we can do this digital activation and all that. That's basically saying we can do these, guaranteed mentions with some cute promotion around it. It's not nearly meaty enough. So they need to actually get the sponsor engaged and intrinsically involved with that. But yeah, I mean, I think that that the focus on activations by rights holders has hurt everybody. It's sort of, as you said, they sort of sell what they know. And so used to be, 10 years ago or so, activation and leverage meant exactly the same thing. Yep. But then people, like a team or whatever would say, and then you get an activation space. Yep. And an activation space is basically defined as it's a space at a stadium or some venue or whatever where they can do something with the in-person fans. Yep. You got people spending ridiculous amounts of money to put 200 people through a virtual reality thing, or, how high can you jump into basketball and all that kind of stuff. All that is activation spaces. And so you ended up with this hyper focus on what is a sponsor going to do on site. And these things tend to be high touch, low reach, and expensive. Mm-hmm. They need a lot of people. They're only going to reach a certain proportion of the people that are bums on seats. And they do tend to be expensive. Whereas if you think about leverage, I always talk about how activation is like a component of leverage. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying doing stuff on site is a bad thing at all. But you're leaving out all of these remote fans. You're leaving out the customers of the customers of the sponsor and their consumers and their potential consumers and their staff. All are left out of that. Whereas leverage does something on site, maybe, and also does all this digital stuff and does staff programs. And launches new products and does market research and all this tons of other stuff. So I think that, if coming out of this, that we end up with both sponsors and rights holders talking about activation as being that thing that happens on site as part of a larger leverage program that is multifaceted and comes together in a really interesting, strategic way for each of those sponsors, that'll be a real big win for our industry. That will be huge.
And so one of the things that sometimes from the rights holder side, they struggle with is understanding what to put a value on that space. Like they have got, they've got their history of, we know what we're going to value that space, that 4x4 spot in a stadium, and that's what they sell it for. But they've had trouble in going, what is the value of our 100,000 fans or 1 million digital fans? What does that look like? How have you seen that push-pull on both sides to try to figure out what that value is? And do you think that
whole valuation thing is just a total giant furphy?
Yeah.
I just think it's ridiculous. There's an industry that's grown up around it that says it's legitimate, but it's not. Because what you're actually doing as a rights holder, if you're selling a sponsorship, is you're selling something that is bespoke and it's purpose-built for that sponsor.
Yep.
And it's going to have, even those same complement of benefits are going to have different values for different sponsors. Like for instance, let's say that you're a world-beating, giant basketball team in America, right? So you could sell the same benefits to the one location, the best sporting goods store in town. One location, family owned, one location, right? And you can give them a set of benefits that is going to give them amazing digital. They're going to do so much with it. It's going to be just amazing, right? But then if you turned around and sold that same thing to Dick's Sporting Goods or somebody else that has a big regional or national footprint, it is potentially leverageable across a much huger footprint of people. So the same benefits are worth completely different amounts of money. So trying to put a value on, a specific benefit, like, here's our 3x3 meter space that you can have, or 4x4, or whatever it is, unless you would normally sell that a la carte, like tickets. Tickets have a value. The value's on the front. And or a hospitality suite, for instance, where you don't have to be a sponsor to have a hospitality suite.
Yep.
Aside from those things, as a component of a larger sponsorship, a sponsorship is always going to be worth more than the sum of the parts if it's actually put together well and in a strategic way. Yep. So how much is that thing worth? How much is the whole sponsorship worth? Don't try to break those things out. It's making a rod for your own back.
Yeah, and
I do think, frankly, don't care that much. They just want something that works.
But it is a real pain point or a worry point. They're like, we need to know what, and I've done it, we need to know what that Facebook post is worth and that Twitter post is worth. And it's like, I understand that. I understand it. And I can tell you, like, that post is worth $1,000, and you do 100 of them, it means it's worth $100,000. Would you pay $100,000? They go no. So it's like, why do we do the exercise?
If we had $100,000, we'd do something completely different than that. Yeah.
So but really, you're focusing on what the sponsor wants and what's going to work for them. Do you think?
But I'm not actually even a fan of guaranteed sponsor mentions. I got to say, like, that's just, it's just like digital signage, it's like there's,
it's digital logo,
it's a digital wallpaper.
Yeah.
But what I do advocate is, look, if a sponsor comes up with a really shit hot idea, man, if they do, just plug the hell out of it on the old social media. Like, don't put some cap on it. if it's like good for you and good for the fans and good for the sponsor, that will get other sponsors coming up with better ideas so they get that kind of support.
But I do think those questions, and I have heard a couple of different people say that same thing with, that qualifier of, does it work for the sponsor? Yes, that's great. We'll do it. But does it also work for the fan and the team and fit with our brand? Like, if you don't answer those three questions, and it's only one of them, it's definitely going to fall flat. And so you've got to be strong enough to be able to go back to your sponsor and say, no, we need to tweak this to fit with what we're trying to do. Otherwise, it's gonna fall flat.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things, was reason for me to reach out. You've written 2 articles, one before the pandemic, which was again quite prophetic.
Yeah, there we go. In January, talking about
January,
a recession, just in case we have a recession coming.
So about recession-proofing your sponsorship program, and then another one around rights holders' guide to sponsorship in pandemic. I shared it in the Sports Geek News recently. Had a lot of feedback. What are some of the recession? There were those signs of there's going to be some tough times ahead. I don't think but no one saw the pandemic coming.
No.
What's some of the points around the rights holders guide for sponsorship in the pandemic? What should we've even gone through this 6 weeks it has been now, 6 to 8 weeks where we've either been in quarantine and lockdown, and sports have stopped. And we've always seen a bit of a mad panic of what we're trying to do, and now we're starting to figure out what return looks like. What's your advice currently to rights holders that are poring over their contracts and worried that they're not going to get their money and that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, we've got all sorts of mixed messages going right now. I mean, IEG came out recently with after a survey saying that 52%, I think the figure was 52% of sponsors in America were saying that they expected sponsorship to be back to normal within 3 to 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
If this was like a locked-in mortgage rate, I'd be doing it right now.
I know. I'm thinking, okay, then you've got people, like actual scientists saying that the recovery from the pandemic is likely to be 18 months to 2 years long. That we're going to continue to have peaks and valleys in that, depending on various countries' response to it and all that, even in some places, states' response to it.
Yep.
And that sports and other mass participation events are likely to be amongst the last things that come back in terms of people attending. That's not to say that you can't have empty stadiums with games happening, but so we are likely to be at the later end of the recovery in terms of going back to something that approximates normal. Now, am I a scientist? No, my previous university notwithstanding, I am not a scientist, but you sort of look at these two things and you're going, I just can't see it coming back that fast. So I think that at this point, extending contracts is going to be really important, as well as really getting good at this whole remote fan thing. Yep. And as you as a rights holder are actually doing the outreach to those fans, to always be including your sponsors in that. And because it's, at this point, that's all they've got. And most of them will have force majeure exit clauses. And if you don't want them exercising those, you have got to look after them, because they have every right to just bugger off if they're looking at 2 years. Oh, sorry. That's all right.
I'll let you hit pause on that phone call. I guess I wanted to. There has been a little bit of a period now where it's like we know there's going to be a world of pain or parts of that going forward. Yep. And there's been a little bit of, we've gone into make good territory, right? Which sort of sometimes happens in the last 3 months of a contract where people look back at the contract and realize they haven't done stuff, and you start seeing this fervor of activity, which, I like the meme, bad campaigns are coming as everyone's trying to get their things done. Yeah. We sort of feel like we're in a bit of that now, but sports may come back. It might be in a different form, and and there's a little bit of, from the people I've discussed it with, it's like, yes, we want to be doing some stuff, having the conversation with our sponsors, but we don't want to do a whole bunch of content just for content's sake while everyone's in lockdown, when we will, we've got to come up with new types of inventory and new ways to engage our fans that will actually be easier once the sport potentially returns.
Yeah, but those fans are in pain right now.
Yeah.
They have needs right now. Those fans are missing it. They want to be engaged. They want the content. They're hungry for anything. They've been waiting for, games that aren't happening and events that aren't happening. It's like, if you just go, oh yeah, well, stuff the fans for a while here while we get our crap together. That's not helping anybody. You've got to actually look after them right now. They're having a fan experience, and right now their fan experience is terrible.
Yep.
And so, don't think that just because the game's not happening or the sporting event isn't happening, that they're not having a fan experience.
No, I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is they're producing a lot of content. I just feel like the pressure to service and over-service the sponsors is there, and I don't think you have to go all the way down, because there will be new products and new content and new initiatives, and you want to be having that open dialogue with the sponsors, because we're going to get some innovation in the space, whether it's we want to do these kind of things, and that's what your sponsors want to be involved in. You can do the nice little the sugar hits to keep them involved, but start looking at those bigger pieces. Of course,
but at this point, you got to multitask.
Definitely.
And at this point, most of the really good stuff in terms of fan engagement coming out is not involving sponsors at all.
Yeah.
So, they're falling over on that. So, yeah, you want to do some sugar hits, get the sponsors in on the sugar hits. Help the sponsors to understand what they can do to keep the sugar hits coming while the rights holder gets their crap together.
So you talked before about bespoke, and it's one of the things that's a frustration for me. Now I've got my own esports team in Gravitas, and I talk to a sponsor about, hey, what about esports? And I get cool, send me a deck, send me your packages, and I'm like. But I want to know what you want. Like, I don't want to put your logo on my jersey or just do this when I don't know what you want. How do you?
Yeah, I guess esports fans are brutal about that kind of like phoning it in sponsorship anyway. So.
Completely, but it doesn't matter if it's esports or anything. I mean, how do you handle it? One, if you're a rights holder and you just hand over here's our packages, sir, or the other one, how do you move past that to start getting into to something bespoke to, I guess, get a better outcome?
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've got a couple of different things happening here. First off, most of the time, if a sponsor says, just send me your deck or just send me a proposal or, send me your packages.
Yep.
They're saying no to you. They just don't want to say no to you. They just want to get you off the phone or walk away from you at the conference or whatever.
Yep.
In terms of esports, it's kind of the new U-Butte thing.
Yes.
And so you probably have actually a little bit more chance that they might be seriously considering that than most organizations would. But I think that in general terms, that it's really a bad idea to send anything generic at all. If you must, send like a one-sheeter just to tell them a little bit, just a thumbnail what you're about. And you can even, include on that a paragraph from a sponsor of yours that does really amazing things, like the 150-word case study, and saying, we would like to create something, that is just as inspired and just as strategic based on your needs and your target markets. And that's it. Yeah. Don't ever send them something generic, because you're creating a rod for your own back.
It just becomes a thing that they start ticking and put crosses
Correct.
against the things that they don't want.
And I think that the just like after the global financial crisis, the Great Recession in 2008, that caused sponsor sophistication to rise exponentially. This is going to make it even rise more. So, if you start sending them something generic now or a year from now, it's going to be met with even more derision than it was a couple of years back.
Yeah.
So their expectations are going to go, their expectations are going to get higher. Their requirements are going to get higher, and phoning it in, is just not going to be okay anymore.
Yeah, I definitely think, sort of finding out more about the esports space, like the tech and the endemic, as they call it in the esports space, all the keyboard and headset retailers and all of that kind of stuff are still in that space. Oh, cool. Yeah, just push out some, like they're not as advanced, but if you're pushing to a savvy sponsor that's doing stuff in the sports or the arts, all that kind of stuff, they're going, I don't care how many, Twitch views you've got, or like putting my logo on this thing, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, it doesn't fit. So that education process, and that's where there's a lot of maturity and a lot more upside, or I guess a lot more to learn, I should say, in the esports space.
Yeah.
That will be accelerated by this, which I think you're right. I think the focus on cost and deliverables and what you're actually doing is going to be far more paramount coming out of this.
I think this is going to be an absolutely brutal 18 months or so. I think in 2 years that sponsorship is going to be so much more sophisticated. Like, there's going to be so many more sponsors and rights holders that have kind of joined that best practice ranks. And so if you can look long-term and suffer through what we're suffering through, all of us, that the outcome of all of this is going to be really good for our industry on balance.
Do you think more will move, because you're seeing, again, as sponsorship marketing budgets shrink or become more scrutinized by CMOs or CEOs and say, we're not going to let you spend that money unless you show us how much. Do you think more of it's going to move to almost performance marketing, because they know how much money they can give Google and Facebook to acquire customers and make sales? Do you think
but Facebook and Google doesn't have meaning and passion wrapped right up in it. I mean, they need that. They actually need that. And I don't actually think that that's the case, because sponsorship is really measurable in a really amazing, multifaceted, multi-textured way. It's just that they have to learn how to do that.
Yep.
If an organization is going, is still saying, the problem is with sponsorship is you can't really measure it. It's like, they're not even trying. Measurement is not that hard. It's like, what are you measuring now? Well, then measure it around sponsorship.
Yeah. So I completely agree, but that is the easy out for some to say, we know what this spend is doing. But sponsorship offers a whole bunch more. Plus, it's tying to that, that avidity and the IP and the fandom that they have.
Yep.
Is what you have to keep selling, and you have to really stand your ground to say, well, if you want, you could just target our fans on the digital platforms and hope for the best. But if it's enacted through us,
but people are looking for authenticity now, not just not just people kind of whitewashing it and pretending. And so, they want sponsors that stand for something, and that sponsors that are there with them as fans, and all of that. They don't get that with micro-targeting and all of that kind of stuff. They actually need to have something interesting to talk about in all that micro-targeting. And sponsorship gives that to them. My guess at the end of all of this is that we'll end up with sponsors having sort of lean, mean portfolios with fewer sponsorships. If they've got a collection of sponsorships, you're going to have more umbrella sponsorships around specific kind of topics or themes. And that all of their sponsorships are going to be in the area of, like, they're all going to be multi-tools. So they're going to be sponsorships that they can leverage in squillions of different ways, in season, out of season, remote fans, in person. So it's like they can just go, okay, we need to accomplish this quarter. What, in 2 quarters from now, what can we do with this sponsorship? And there will be something.
Yeah.
So it's going to be all about relevance, meaning, passion, and all of those things sitting underneath. And then what can we do with all of that? So I would imagine that there's going to be fewer, larger sponsorships used much better and measured much better at the end of all of this. Now, what you need then is the rights holders to go, okay, this is how we're going to respond to that and create these big, bespoke, multifaceted offers that aren't just about the season. They're not just about the game experience. They're not just about our ticket buyers. They are about everybody that cares. and that will position them to be one of those, the fewer, bigger sponsorships that are being really, really well used. But that is an entirely different mindset than the numbers game most sports play.
Yeah. And that's going to be the shift that they're going to have to make as they, keep getting no's if they still go down the old path of this is how we've always done it.
Oh, because man, I'm telling you, I did a series of workshops middle of last year across Australia and New Zealand. And I was still hearing people say, after the global financial crisis in 2008, sponsorship has never rebounded. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm going, nah, mate. The problem is sponsors got more sophisticated. You didn't. And you're just seeing your diminishing returns because you haven't kept pace with the response that the sponsors had to the greater accountability around sponsorships.
Definitely. So thank you very much for your time. What I want to do is finish off with the Sports Geek closing five here with Kim Skildum-Reid. Thank you very much for the chat. Have enjoyed it. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I think so. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure that the first sports event, in fact, I'm very sure, was to watch my two uncles playing ice hockey at Mounds View High School in Minnesota.
Okay.
And yes, and because of course I'm from Minnesota originally, and ice hockey is the thing. And sitting there at the age of probably about 4 with a cowbell ringing it.
Definitely. You would have been a few sports events and a few sponsor functions and hospitality suites at sports events. Do you have a favorite food memory, or do you have a go-to food when you go to a sports event?
In American sports events, particularly baseball, I got to say I love a corn dog.
Okay. Yes.
I do love with lots of mustard.
Yeah, it is
in Australia, I'm sort of like, I could probably eat about 4 packets of hot chips with tons of ketchup.
Yeah, exactly. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Mail, because I work all over the world. And so I get emails from clients at 3:00 in the morning. So I got to make sure literally while I'm still laying in bed at 6 a.m., I got to see, okay, do I have to jump out of bed and go call somebody in Boston or something?
Yeah, no, exactly. It is funny when you're getting emails from other parts of the world, and everyone's on a different work schedule, obviously.
Yeah.
Who is someone that you suggest the Sports Geek podcast listeners should follow, and why?
I love the Unofficial Partner.
Yes.
Out of London. And also out of London, Activative is my very, very favorite place for case studies.
Okay.
Activative.co.uk and Unofficial Partner.
Terrific. And lastly, what social media platform is your MVP? What's your go-to platform?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a tie because they really do different jobs for me, is LinkedIn and Twitter. So I have found, in terms of business, I have found Facebook to be an absolute dead loss.
It's a little bit that way, but LinkedIn.
I don't know that, like, my job is really in this office or on planes usually.
Yeah.
So there's not really much to put on Instagram for me. So, I'm a completely useless follow on Instagram. So basically Twitter and LinkedIn.
And they're the best places to connect with you. Where could people find you on the internet?
Well, LinkedIn and Twitter are great places. My messages are open. You're welcome to contact me and all that. But also powersponsorship.com has all my contact details, and sort of you can sign up for newsletters and things there as well. And so you can email me through that. Either way is fine with me. I certainly check all of those all the time.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Appreciate you sharing your knowledge in the sponsorship space. And here's hoping that the industry overall can hold on, adapt, and thrive coming out of this. I think because
we're hoping that
we're a resilient bunch in sports and sponsorships especially. So here's hoping we all get through it.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate the invite to come on.
We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon.
Thanks again to Kim. You can send her a tweet. Kim Skildum-Reid, KIMSKILDUMREID. Or go to her website, powersponsorship.com, and register for sponsorship webinars. As she discussed, there's so many things changing in the sponsorship space, and especially when there's a pandemic on, how you're managing a relationship with your partners both now and into the future is going to be super important. I do think everything has been accelerated by COVID, and I think sponsorship is going to be one of the biggest parts of the sports industry disrupted. Okay, James, it's time for one slide, 2 minutes. This is where I find a slide, mine or someone else's, and present it or represent it for 2020. Start the clock. So this slide, I have been using variations of this slide for nearly 10 years. It's entitled Where Digital Delivers. And for mine, there's 4 phases of the fan journey in the way that we're interacting with different groups of fans. At one end, we're in the building audience space, where we're trying to reach new fans, find new fans. And we're doing that in esports. We're doing that with Gravitas, trying to reach as many fans as possible so they're aware of us. And then the next step is to engage those fans. We want them to like and follow and comment and start falling in love with what we're producing. And then what we have in the middle of the slide is the money line. We need to get them over the money line. We get them over the money line by converting them, capturing their emails, selling them a ticket, selling them a hoodie, getting them to engage in a sponsor campaign. Once we convert them, now we're in transactional land. We've got their data or we've got some money. And then the last piece is once we've got them, we have to retain them. We have to keep them. And so at one side, on the left side is building audience, and on the right side is building revenue. So the more people you've got in that conversion space and the retained space, the better off the money is flowing in. That slide, as I said, I've been using it pretty much off and on for 10 years, and it hasn't changed too much. And everyone's got fans in different segments. You're always trying to reach new fans, might be a new demographic, a new subset, a new geographical area. You're always trying to engage those fans, bring them closer, and then convert them. So everyone's always working those 4 phases for mine in the building audience piece and building revenue piece. Picture of that slide will be in the show notes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/278. My last segment is to do this today. One tactic that you can implement today that will improve your life. Try this week. Send someone a random thank you. Send them an email, send them a text. It can be as simple as just saying thank you. It's always well received. It's awesome to get a thank you. It's even better when you get a thank you and you say why. So for mine, I'm a big fan of, kindness wins. Try it. Let me know how you go. Send a random thank you to a work colleague, someone who you probably haven't seen because you're working from home. Everyone's working from home. Send a random thank you. That's it from me. The links to make it easy, they're all at sportsgeekhq.com. You can find the link to this episode at sportsgeekhq.com. You can reach out and talk to me about digital to dollars, how I can help your sport, your club get through this, help you redefine what you're doing in the sponsorship space to get through this, and you leverage digital by using digital to dollars. If you're interested in Sports Geek Amplify, if you're a business that wants to reach the Sports Geek audience, working on a content series specifically for that. So if you've got a sports technology, marketing, digital solution that's going to help, I really want to talk to you. If you're someone that is being displaced, stood down, looking for work, wants to put your hand up to help the world of sports business, please register and become a sports business rock star. I'll do my best to connect you with people in my network. But even better, go and connect with those people. All their links to their LinkedIn are there. Connect and potentially find someone that potentially might work with, might be a new colleague. And then lastly, please sign up for next week's Sports Biz Zoom call. you've got to remember to go back and register each week. Got to make sure that's a new, fresh Zoom link every time. And as I said before, it's a really, the wider the audience, the depth of the opinion, the different conversations that are coming out of these Zoom calls have been amazing. So simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/Zoom calls. Hopefully you've got that bookmarked by now. One of the suggestions, we were talking about what's going to happen post-COVID. One of the suggestions was we should continue the Zoom calls after post-COVID. I like that idea. I'm enjoying it. And I think it's a really good way to collaborate on a global level with different people. So I think most likely I'll keep doing it. As always, I really would appreciate your support on Patreon. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon, or even if you just wouldn't mind giving a humble podcaster a review on iTunes, that would be really appreciated. It's sitting on 130 for so long, and I just want to push it up to 150. For those of you who've already given a review, I really do appreciate it. Until next episode, as always, you can get me on all social media platforms or Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. My name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join Sports Geek Nation access to exclusive Slack and Facebook groups with regular Q&A sessions with Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeeknation.com to join. Got a question for Sean? Send it in for our Sports Geek Q&A series. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/questions. Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources.